Welcome everybody back to the Health Mastery Show. Today I have on with me performance and sports psychologist Hugh Gilmore. It was a really interesting conversation with Hugh. He works with professional athletes and top tier athletes, including Olympians, helping them get their mindset right in order to maximize performance. I never had a sports psychologist on the podcast before. Actually, in fact, I've never spoke to one. Many people misunderstand what they do, but we've had a really interesting conversation all about how to help people change, how to get them into the right mindset. We even touch on things like motivational interviewing, which Hugh is a trainer in and helps other coaches to help them serve their athletes and their clients better. So really interesting topic. And even if you're not somebody who's a coach or is involved in helping others, this can be really good for asking yourself particular questions to get the most out of yourself and your mindset. So without further ado, let's get into this episode with Hugh Gilmore. So Hugh, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Not a problem at all. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, great. So this is, I guess, a little bit different than some of the other guests that we've had on before, at least your field and your expertise. So for those perhaps who haven't heard of you, it would be great if you could do a bit of an intro. I think you do better justice than I would.
Well, I suppose I've been working in elite sport with Olympic and Paralympic athletes for the last 7, 8, maybe 10 years now. And in the role of a sports psych. Within that, I'm also qualified to train people in motivational interviewing. It's something that I'm quite passionate about in performance sport. And also rational emotive behaviour therapy, which is essentially the precursor to CBT, which people might have heard of. And I find that, again, very useful within sport. So I work with British weightlifting and British athletics, but I've actually published my undergraduate dissertation in a notational analysis of the skills of hurling. So I've got a background in hurling, weightlifting, and I've sat in board of directors for Netball Northern Ireland and also national committees for weightlifting Northern Ireland. So I've got a lot of experience, coaching from under 8s right up to working with the best athletes in the world.
So if you were to give an elevator pitch to say, what do you do, Hugh? What would you say you do?
I help people think better so that they can enhance their performance. Very simply.
Very good. So I suppose if we're trying to give it a kind of a definite role, a definition of that, you're a sports psychologist. Would that be correct?
Yeah. So I'm a sports psych, and part of my role is direct facing with athletes. And helping them think better, but then it also goes into like team dynamics and helping the team operate better, the support staff around them as well. And again, that's where motivational interviewing comes in, because it helps people communicate better and basically get better results in a performance domain.
Sure.
So there's a couple of different ends to being a sports psych, whether it's like straight up with the athlete or actually looking at it from how the team operates.
So I guess a lot of people probably wouldn't be familiar with what a sports psychologist actually does. You may have heard, I think myself, I may have heard of Padraig Harrington, who was a very famous Irish golfer. He actually went to my school, and say like NBA teams. I'm a fan of basketball, so I've heard some NBA teams working some players that kind of not playing great. They're working with a sports psychologist. But what exactly does a sports psychologist do, other than, I guess a lot of people think they're just there to rile people up and get them motivated?
So part of the thing is the actual sitting down and chatting with the athlete and helping them understand how they think and behave the way they do. And whenever they start to understand how they think and behave the way they do, they can then take control of that and start challenging that where they think and behave in ways that are actually not useful to their performance. So, very simply, everyone has emotions, and emotions give us behavioural urges. So, for example, when people get angry, the behavioural urge is to smash whatever's in front of you. It's to attack or be aggressive towards that. But again, what the role of the psych is to do in that scenario is to help the athlete understand, okay, you're angry towards something, but actually that action, that behavioural urge might not be the best thing, and to create what would be defined as a stimulus response gap for them to actually process. So the stimulus of something's happened, we often jump straight into a response without actually thinking about it and without actually understanding how we get into those patterns. So that's part of it. I mean, the other part of it is facilitation of like group dynamics, like how do we come together as a team and how do we build a culture in a sport or a team, and how do you actually go through that process? And it's through a process of engagement with everyone, and then pulling apart what it is people actually want. And the problem with us as humans is that we're not really good at communicating. For example, people will say things like, we need somebody back to the way they were. You know, you hear, I need to get back to the way I was. And it's like, well, that's fairly shit language. Hopefully I can swear in this podcast. But it's fairly shit language because it's not descriptive enough, and it's also judgmental in the sense that they're saying that you're not good enough currently. And it's, you know, insinuating that we have to go back in time. Like, how do we make someone's understanding observable, achievable, and promotable? So those are three words that I regularly use to help people create clear definitions of performance. Because if we ask that question of, okay, well, what do you mean by we need to get back to the way that we used to be? Well, on a Tuesday at 2 p.m, what are you doing? Define to me exactly the behaviour you would be doing, and are you stating in a way that's actually achievable? Because people will say things, and I need to be able to go into training in a good mood, but they'll actually phrase it the wrong way. They go, I need to go into training I need to stop going into training in a bad mood. Well, that's not an achievable thing. You only know that's happening when you're in a bad mood. So you need to say what it is you want, and phrase it that way in an organisation, so that then everyone has a clear understanding of, this is what we're aiming for. It's observable. We can see it being done. It's achievable. We know what it looks like on a Tuesday at 2 p.m. And then it's promotable. It's not private. We can talk about it among the team. And that's basically a big heavy hammer to hit culture with, is those three words, because then you start defining things as opposed to, we all need to be happy. What the hell does that look like? You know, that's just a word. What does the behaviour look like? What would you see? What would be occurring? So, yeah. Sorry, I'm really jumping off the deep end.
No, I guess when people say that those things, what they really mean is that would be a mediator or facilitate something else, what they're actually trying to achieve. Like, why is it that you'd want to be in a good mood to go into training? Like, there's obviously, or when you want to get back to the way you were, it's because maybe some lag measure or performance indicators has disimproved or something like that. I guess that's kind of what people would generally mean. Would it be?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what people talk about. But then the other thing about this is, like, you know, I've already sort of committed one of the sins is, we need to be happy. And that's kind of what you hear from people. It's also a bit bullshit, because we need to educate people and systems to understand that, no, we need to understand that when we have an emotion that is what people will call negative, is that's actually useful and adaptive. So there's a difference between unhealthy emotion and healthy negative emotion. An example being, if you have anxiety, that's unhealthy, because when you've got anxiety, you'd avoid the situation. But it's healthy to have concerns. It's healthy to think about things that are. It's healthy to think about things in a way that are concerns, because then you can actually take action against them in a preventative measure. So it's like, what is a healthy negative emotion? So we shouldn't always be sort of landed on the side of keeping things very positive.
When you work specifically with athletes, is that mainly for, or teams, is that mainly for the improvement of performance? Because you mentioned stuff around kind of emotions, stuff where I guess they would work with a psychologist, but is your role specifically to help with the performance aspect? And then if there was other issues that are going on, would that be passed on to, say, a clinical psychologist or something like that?
So in terms of mental health, the role of a sports psychologist is to work within performance, where there's got issues which are subclinical, like close to the edge of being clinical. You'd maybe have some knowledge and awareness of them and help direct the person. Where it's clinical, you would direct the person to a clinical site and signpost them, or direct them to their GP. So I don't work with mental health. That said, you know, part of my role is obviously developing, and for the last 2 years, I've been going to a special interest group of forensic psychologists who work with criminals and seeing how rational motive behaviour therapy has been put to place in that arena, and that's been very eye-opening for me. What exactly they have to deal with. I think that's it. That's a good way to think about performance. Whenever you're trying to enhance somebody's performance, it's like, what's the harshest environment you could put your skills into place, and how do they work in that place? Because if you can succeed there, then you can succeed anywhere. And I don't see that there's a lot of difference between sport and clinical psych. I see that there's actually, there is a lot of different skill sets required and a lot of different knowledge, but actually it's still people skills, it's still interacting with people, and it's still trying to get the best out of people. It's just you're working at a different level of health and wellness, and obviously there's a lot more confounding factors. But within mental health, I think within sport though, people don't see the confounding factors as often. So we talk about the biopsychosocial model of like, what's their biology, what's their psychology, and what's their sociology. So from those different levels, what's going on. So if going down a rabbit hole here, so feel free to pull me out. But for example, from a biological level, if somebody say for example somebody has a disability, right? They might have a condition. So I've worked with athletes with conditions whereby they're intellectually challenged, and that's part of their disability. But then on top of that, you might have the fact that somebody from a sociological perspective might be stared at, might be looked at more than others. And if you think about that across like a 10-20 year lifespan growing up, they might then become a little bit concerned about going out in public, a little bit concerned about being looked at, and then you think about like, well, how is this person going to respond under pressure? What is this person like whenever they're trying to go on camera or step out? So again, you've got these issues of how do they perform under pressure in a competition environment, in a televised event. So again, that's some of the complexity that might occur within, for example, Paralympic sport, which is something that a lot of my work is in.
Yeah, and I guess it's probably very hard to quantify, but it's not something that you'd usually see, especially through amateur sports. Everything is just down to the coach, who may be just a volunteer, or they may not be very trained in this area. But how important is your mental capacity and your resiliency and your mindset when it comes to performance? Because often we're just kind of told, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, or it's not really focused on. It's more so focused on skill or nutrition or strength and conditioning, but very rarely this is focused on. And it could be that it's an unknown, or that people just don't have the skills to focus on.
The issue we have is people say words, but nobody says how. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Well, how? What's the how behind that? So very simple. If you're getting annoyed and frustrated about your performance in the pitch, or your performance in the gym, or whatever it is, what is the thing that's annoying you? Have you got any examples of setbacks that you've experienced, Adam?
A lot. I don't know. Are you talking about like psychological setbacks?
Anything. Pick anything you're happy to share.
Sometimes, I feel like I could almost give myself that extra push sometimes. Like when I see, let's say in my bodybuilding career, for example, I know that sometimes maybe I'm not fully there mentally in the gym when I'm say looking at the top performers. It's hard to say exactly what the difference is, but they can just kind of zone in a lot more. It's kind of difficult for me when I have a very busy lifestyle, a lot of other things going on. It's hard to really focus and say that was a really, really good session. So it kind of went through the motions a little bit there.
Right, so let's take that. What you're basically saying is I'm a little bit irritated, frustrated, annoyed about my performance in the gym. I feel as if it's not as good as it could be.
Yeah.
Right. So what I would do in that scenario with somebody is, okay, we say things, people say, oh, control the controllables, focus on the controllables, how, okay? The how in this case is going to be, what's the facts and what's the judgments? What you've said, the judgments are it's bad to be not focused in the gym, but the facts are what you've been to the gym, you've put in a session, and you feel it doesn't meet something you've done in there, doesn't meet your standards, and you would like to achieve greater. That's a fact. Whereas the judgment is this is bad. But why is it not a case of, okay, I've had a string of crap sessions in the gym, what do I change? Why is that not, okay, this is an opportunity for learning? Why can that not be the judgment? So we take the mental experience that we've got, we split it in two. On one side you've got facts, and the other side you've got the judgment, and that's how you learn to focus on the controllables. So, you know, it's all well and good saying focus on the controllables or whatever, but that's the same as an S&C coach saying get stronger, get faster. Meanings, absolute meanings, because strength is like multiple definitions, whether it's relative strength, absolute strength, speed strength, you know, isometric strength, resisting strength. You know, like, what do you mean, and then how do you train that? So from the same level of detail needs to be thought about within psychology. You know, what do you mean?
And that probably is a good segue into, say, motivational interviewing, I think, which is something that you mentioned at the top of the podcast. It's something that I hadn't really come across before. I may have heard of it, but I guess, could you explain a little bit what that is, and how that kind of works, or what that kind of process is?
So motivational interviewing is a counselling style which evolved out of successful therapy and addictions treatment. So addictions is a pretty rough area to work in. If you imagine, you know, people have their lives destroyed by gambling, drug use, alcohol. Ultimately, the gambling, drug use and alcohol is better than their current experience of life, and that's why they get addicted to it. It provides something. And the big thing that happens with addictions is you tell people, here, stop that, you know, you're destroying your life. But the issue there is that we get this thing called psychological reactance. As soon as I tell you what to do, you lose your sense of freedom. So if I tell you now, go and start doing 3 sets of 10 on the squat, and increase it by 10 kilograms every week, you've got no control. I've just told you what to do, like a dictator. So therefore you revolt and you rebel and say, to hell with him, I'm not doing squats. You see this, anybody who's gone to a curry house, what happens is the guy will come out and say, don't touch that, that's hot, the big metal thing they set the plates on, and everybody reaches in and touches it. And it's because their freedom's been taken away because they've been told what to do. So they must rebel. And this is called psychological reactance, which occurs a lot when you're working with populations like that, where they need to change, but also if you tell them to change, then they push against you, so that doesn't help. Motivational interviewing then is a different approach, where you speak to somebody and you accept where they're at. So it has what they call a spirit, which, you know, could be replaced by the word philosophy. But for the lay person, let's just call it, you go into a conversation with an intent. And there's 4 components to the intent of motivational interviewing: partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. And if you go into a conversation with that intent of partnership, accepting them where they're at, compassion for their situation, and to evoke out their reasons for change or their reasons for squatting and getting stronger, then you're going to have a better conversation. And then underneath that, there's skills and techniques which you use, and you don't use them because they're useful. You use them because they allow you to embody the spirit or the intent, and that's what motivational interviewing is. So it's a very effective, highly researched counselling style, or conversation style.
Yeah, so you kind of touched on a little bit there, where kind of people have this reactive response. And I heard you in I think it was another podcast, but previously, where you mentioned that you work with some clients that want to, say, improve their health or body composition. I've experienced this myself, having been a coach over the years, and I think I really resonated with the podcast you said, where you kind of, everyone starts out as absolutely brutal, and if you haven't realised that, you're obviously still pretty brutal. So you mentioned in one of them that, or what I've experienced is that, like, you'll work with some clients, and not all clients, but definitely it's happened a few times where somebody will voice what they want to achieve. Let's say, I have this kind of, say, authority bias where people say, oh, you're in great shape, so I want to be like that. And then, realistically, maybe they may not be able to achieve that in a short time frame. And they've never achieved any kind of success, so to speak, in that domain before, where they've never successfully lost body fat to what they consider success. And they'll continue to say, this is what I want, this is what I want. And no matter what you do, whether it's the kind of the tactics that you take, whether it's, of course, we know some things that are not going to work, like a very rigid meal plan or a very specific types of food or a way of training that you have to follow, that might not work. But I've even experienced where you'll try so many different ways that technically should work on paper, and you facilitated different ways of achieving this goal, but they still can't achieve it. And you think, like, why did they go out and go on a 3-day bender when they've voiced this? We've worked out what they want to achieve. They've voiced why they want to achieve it. We've tried some flexible approach. We've tried so many different ways, but yet they still almost self-sabotage, or it's like they purposely do this, and they just can't get there. And I guess a lot of people probably do experience something like that, where it's like it's not a knowledge thing. It's not like they didn't know that they had to be in a calorie deficit, or that they didn't have to, eating a Domino's pizza and a family portion of chips isn't the best decision to make. Do you have any experience of why people might do this, and how they can perhaps start to unpeel this onion?
What is it that doing those things meets the need of? So basically, if you go out and you eat the food, why are you eating the food that that isn't aligned with your goals? You're eating it because either there's maybe a social occasion and you might feel the need to have to fit in. It might be something along the lines of, this food gives me comfort, therefore I eat when I feel shit. It might be along the lines of, I'm fed up, it's so much effort, I need to relax, and this eating the food is relaxation for you. So to me, it's like when you use a substance or a behavior to relieve a feeling of frustration or whatever it is, then that's the issue. Is that it's not that you don't know, it's that actually you don't know how to cope, and you haven't become aware of the pattern that you've got. So, for example, I used to work in a job and there was a garage next door which did really good chicken and chips. And then this used to be, I used to get into the habit of, like, I'm hungry, I haven't made my lunch, I'll go over and get chicken and chips. It was cheap, it was tasty, it was great. Next thing you know, I'm like 3 stone heavier. And it's simply because I was not meeting my needs in terms of preparation. Didn't have another option. I didn't have the ability to sort of sustain myself in that sort of, I've been working hard all morning and I need something to eat. I maybe skip breakfast, and to justify it's okay to have a big lunch if you skip your breakfast, etc. So there's lots of things going on there, but like I still had the goal of don't be a fat mess, but yet I ended up a fat mess. So if you look at this, you can break it down. There's research from Misha et al. On the CON-B model, and I have to thank Megan Bentley. You should look her up because she's one of the nutritionists I work with. She's done her PhD in this model, and the model is capability, opportunity, motivation. And basically, if you want behavior change, you need to assess somebody. Do they have the capability? Do they have the opportunity? And do they have the motivation? So, like, out of 10, how much capability does somebody have to do what it is required? Is a good assessment. Out of 10, when do they have the opportunity to execute the required skills of behaviors? And then out of 10 again, how motivated they are. And again, motivation, you could break that down into, like, how confident are you can do this, and how important it is to you to do that, out of 10. And again, when you find out, you ask people these scaling ruler questions, which is a skill from MI. You can ask them, why are you a 5 and not a 0? and they'll give you all the good reasons that they want to change, which enhances their motivation. So like you talk about the reasons why they want to change, you ask them those questions of why are you a 5 in terms of capability and not a 0? Oh, because I've got some cookery skills. That's they're telling you that they are then more confident because they've got cookery skills, and you're highlighting it to them. Plus, you're getting information from them about what resources they have that they can then incorporate and use to create that success. So the process there that I'm sort of highlighting is like if you understand the behavior or the pattern and what that pattern is, and then understand that what's their capability, opportunity, and motivation to change that, and to sort of recognize that pattern and do something about it. That would be, I suppose that would be a good process to go through with somebody. I'm not too sure if I answered your question. I think I went down a rabbit hole there.
No, I think you did, where you kind of like you have like a motto where it's like are you ready, are you willing, kind of able to do this, and if you're not 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, you have to kind of dig deeper and understand why they are. But I guess then to follow on to that, the question would be: Are some people just not? I suppose they don't want it enough, so to speak. And you've heard these thrown around where it's like they don't want it enough, because of course we can go into certain things, and there's always things that like I would love to have a multi-billion-dollar passive income SaaS business and have a yacht and be 8% body fat all the time and stuff like that. But
why?
That would be nice.
Why would you want that?
That's a good question. So I suppose that probably no financial freedom.
Why do you want that? Why do you want that?
Not to worry about bills, not to buy whatever.
Why do you not want to worry about bills?
Oh, you got me here. So I guess this is where we're going into. I don't know. It's a good question.
Is it because you're uncomfortable with uncertainty?
Yeah, so I would say that's definitely one.
Okay. And why not just, instead of getting a yacht and having a successful business, why not just get comfortable with uncertainty? Why not accept that, your life might not go to plan and you might end up homeless and die?
Because that's.
Then you'll not need a yacht. You just accept the reality of, well, this is the bottom end capacity for me.
So is everything just getting comfortable with death and mortality?
So the reason I say that is because what I've done there with you is I've inference chained you, where I'm kind of just going, what's a level deeper of what this is, and we get down to we end up, there's 3 basic things that cause us difficulty in life. They are: I don't accept myself, I don't accept others, and I don't accept my life. And your problems can basically be summed up as you're picking one of those 3 things. Now, it's perfectly fine and healthy for you to have a preference to want to go off and work towards those and achieve those if that's what you want. But when you sort of recognize that, okay, wait a minute, I accept myself for who I am, whether I have a yacht or I don't, or I accept my life for what it is, whether I have a yacht or I don't, then that actually frees you up from being a bit distressed about, am I financially free? Can I pay my bills? So I think the big thing for me is that, and it's a common theme in sport, I can't feel. Well, if you can't feel, you can't learn. And if you think about that, that's what sport is. You learn how to get stronger. You learn how to get 8% body fat. You learn how to run a business. And I think there's this, so within rational emotive behavior therapy terms, we talk about putting demands on the world and putting demands on ourselves and changing those demands into preferences. So when you say some people don't want it enough, which was the start of this question, is that a true thing? Is that a situation? That actually is it's a judgmental, blamey thing that a coach will say, or a practitioner will say about an athlete. They just don't want it enough. How come it's not you don't want to work with somebody who's difficult and get good at working with somebody who you define as difficult? And what if they're not difficult? What if actually they've got so much on their plate that they aren't coping, and your job is to help them cope better so that they can actually achieve at a faster rate?
So could it be that the case that, in fact, it's not necessarily what they want at the core? So like you mentioned with the yacht, like it's maybe what that can bring you. So maybe what they want to achieve, and let's say if it's to make it pretty clear, to like a physical feat or a body composition goal, that maybe that's not exactly what it is they want to achieve, but it's something that would then facilitate. Would that be?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, that's facilitating something, and I think it's why do you want to achieve what you want to achieve? So for our listeners, like, why do you want to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve? What is it that will give you? And quite often it's like people do this thing where if I just get to here, I'll be happy. Or if I just get this, that'll be enough. But we're actually programmed to go to get that, and then once we've got it, we're like, oh, I need more. That's, this is why we say that people are happier on the journey than they are at the destination. This is why when people go to Olympic Games, they get post-games blues or depression after it. They can experience that, and that's a documented phenomenon. But again, similarly, like, and this is maybe me speaking out of place and out of turn, but like, how many people have, gone and had a kid and had postnatal depression, and they're like, oh, this is it. And at the same time, there's also a lot of chemical changes there and other issues compounding that. But it's like too many people end up on a path but don't think about why they're on that path. And it's like, you get the dream job, you find out the dream job shit. You get the yacht, you find out like you don't like being at sea. It's like, what? Why do you want a yacht? Yeah. So I'm going down another rabbit hole.
Yeah. Like, I've definitely thought about this before, and one would be thinking from my own perspective. If I let's say if I worked with clients that specifically had a body composition goal, and then I was almost steering them away. Like, well, no, actually, this is not what you really want. You want confidence that you can get this through, I don't know, learning how to play piano. Then, all right, good luck, see you later. So I guess that would be, I mean, I know I'm not a psychologist or kind of a counselor, but I do see how that you could probably end up hemorrhaging your own business if that was. And then the other question would be, how do we not all just kind of boil it down to being Eckhart Tolle on the bench and saying you should be at peace with life and you shouldn't want anything and just sit on the park bench for eternity and be present in the moment? Because you could say, why do you want to achieve anything?
So I'm not too familiar with Eckhart Tolle, other than I know that he's a bit on the fluffy side of things, and I think part of that is because, part of this sort of why not be just at peace and have no preferences. So I've talked about, you look at your demands and you change your demands into a preference. And to summarize that, I need a Ferrari, I should have a Ferrari. I'm only going to be unhappy if I don't have it. Whereas, and the same with, I need 8% body fat. Whereas if I would prefer to be 8% body fat, but if I am not, I can deal with that and work towards it. In the same, you replace that with yacht, Ferrari or whatever. That's a much more adaptive, healthy way of thinking. Whereas as humans, we think in a black and white or heuristic way, which is like system 1 versus system 2 thinking. If you've heard of Daniel Kahneman, we like to have like straight line thinking, because it speeds things up, and we need that. It's important that we have it. If we didn't have it, we would spend too much time thinking. So why not just be at peace and be present all the time? Very simply, your life's not going to go too well. You have the power to shape it. You have the power to exercise control over it, and exercising control over that is a beneficial and healthy thing to do. So having preferences for what you want and acting in a way that moves you towards those is good for you from a mental health capacity. Anytime you achieve something or you achieve a success, then that is you essentially acting in it, or you're receiving some positive mental health and well-being benefit from that, in terms of confidence. I'm sure there's hormonal things that are going on there in terms of serotonin and dopamine, etc. But if you actually want to spend your life sitting in a park bench, then by all means go and do that. But there are also like other things that need to happen, and again, within some of the research is like where you place your focus in terms of your long-term perspective versus your short-term perspective. You've got actual long-term needs, and when you find that you're doing things that meet those long-term needs, you'll go back and focus more on your short-term needs. And then once you find you're meeting those, you'll think more about your long-term needs. So there's research in this within finance, about like how if you write a letter from yourself in the future, to yourself now, you're more likely to make long-term better financial decisions. So like your needs are on a sliding scale. They change daily, depending on what you're achieving. And you get that with people, like once you achieve something, it's like that's no longer important. Something else becomes important, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if that's part of just how, if that's an important part of evolution and why we're not still, you know, using fires with sticks and chasing, you know, wild animals, and we now on Mars. I wonder, is that part of that, is that we always kind of need to strive for more, that drives evolution? I've always kind of thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, part of evolution is, I suppose, progress, but we don't know where the progress is coming from. That's why we have variety. Males are much more varied in physical appearance and capacity because they have it's genetically advantageous to be different and stand out, because then you're more likely to do different things, whereas females are much more homogeneous. I can't remember the exact term, but there's like a male variation. It might just be male variation is the scientific term, which basically means that we're more likely to do things that are risky and dangerous, take risks, and be varied in our approaches. And that's because that might result in a mating opportunity, that because we are then different enough that becomes a desirable characteristic. Hence the term peacocking. You know, it's all about standing out, isn't it?
Yeah, Neil Strauss, The Game.
Right.
Yeah. So, you touched on a little bit, a few really interesting things there, and one of them was kind of like you being accepting of yourself, whether you achieve that or not, and that's obviously not something that's easy to do. And I think that's a core component of something that I'm not really that familiar with, but health at every size. So, you know, of course, if you're 350 pounds and you're 6 foot, you're not necessarily in your best health, but accepting yourself at that first will facilitate you to be able to achieve a healthy body weight. And one thing that's really common, especially amongst men, and those who want to achieve more, is if you're following these kind of motivational pages, or Gary Vaynerchuk or David Goggins or Jocko Willink, it's always like, you know, you watch this video and then, you know, you're supposed to get the sense of motivation to jump and do 20 press-ups after watching the YouTube short. But what's that kind of mindset like, where it's just like no pain, no gain, you know, push yourself. If you fail, you punish yourself with harsher treatment, more exercise, more, I don't know, suffering. It's almost supposed to be like this, self. I don't even know what you would call it, but it's just like, pretty much just punishing yourself if you're not doing well. Is this harmful, or does this actually help people?
Define
why. Why is this kind of mindset so praised and so, I suppose, put on a pedestal? Like, oh, look, David Goggins, he can really kind of, he gets up before he goes to sleep and starts running, and he doesn't eat for a week, and then I don't know, it's almost like he anything that is unpleasurable, he does it for the sake of mental resilience. Okay. Is that how this works?
Yeah. So let's take a look at this. We're associating success with mental capacity, and the issue here is that David Goggins did a couple of feats of endurance and did them on broken feet, in one of the stories that I've heard, and that's a commendable thing. Like, well done, you're tough cookie, you know, you've got some drive. However, if you punish yourself and beat yourself to the point where you broke your feet running, how is that an adaptive behavior that gets you what you want? Why is punishing yourself the goal? Why is not looking after yourself and ensuring your longevity? So the thing for me is, it's a little bit maladaptive if it's all about punishment. It's a bit, I don't know if sycophantic is the right word or something, but it's not necessarily healthy to punish yourself in that way and despise yourself. However, that doesn't mean it can't produce results. You know, there's cases of coaches trying to create OCD-like behaviours in athletes because that's an adaptive way to get consistent gains over time, is to create an OCD-type characteristic of athletes being anxious if they don't do certain behaviours. Now,
is that helpful? So,
well,
like, you see a lot of videos of Kobe Bryant, because he obviously passed away last year, I think, where it's like you have other previous NBA players that I got up at 5 a.m. to be the first to breakfast, and Kobe Bryant had already come back from he was already covered in sweat because I was on breakfast, and he was already. It's like, what time did he wake up at 2 o'clock?
Here's the thing, right? Do we not expect extreme psychological issues with extreme performers? The only thing is that, you know, maybe neglecting your family, neglecting your life, neglecting whatever it is, other responsibilities that you might have, neglecting your health to achieve something, it makes you look good if you achieve it, but if you don't, you know, you've just been neglectful. So because they've got the story of success, that results in this is good, you know,
survivorship bias.
Bias. So I think there's a lot of survivorship bias with that. That said, Goggins, Jocko Willink, you know, what they're actually promoting is I'm responsible for myself, which is a good message, because you are, and you do have a degree of control. And I think, unfortunately, we live in a society where there's like, oh no, this has been done to me, and oh no, I'm a victim here. It's like, no, you can be a survivor, but if you choose to be a victim, you're holding yourself back, and you're responsible for how you react to your situation. So I've got dyslexia. I still have to write. I still have to communicate. I make mistakes on a daily basis, but I'm not letting it hold me back. And I think it's like, the issue is if you let something hold you back and you wallow in it, we need to, and this is a really interesting paradox, because from a personal perspective, I can't afford to see myself as a victim in any scenario, because I have to be a survivor of whatever difficulty I face or whatever challenge I face. But if I'm working with somebody, I have to show compassion to them, because if I go in and say, here, toughen up, you're a sack of shit, you're weak, you're soft, you know, all these things that people say, what I'm doing is I'm being judgmental. I'm not showing them compassion. I'm not showing them how to actually, I'm not giving them the space to understand themselves, and I'm not even being facilitative there. I'm just being a dictator. So I need to be hard on myself, but I need to be soft in others.
Yeah,
and and then hopefully they'll become hard on themselves to a degree, and to a degree where it's adaptive. But let's not conflate psychological approaches with performances against a goal, and let's not say that performances against the goal are a good thing. A really good thing that I've been saying to athletes prior to the games this year, when they're all stressing about qualifying, was, right, why do you want to go to the games? They talk about that for a bit and say, look, if you go to the cinema, does that make you a better person? No. If you go to the games, the Olympics, does that make you a better person? No. If you get 8% body fat, does that make you a better person? No. Your self-worth, what you're worth as a human, doesn't change because of what you do. And we know this because if I was to turn around and say to you, okay, because you've achieved yacht, 8% body fat, financial freedom, and a 300 kilogram squat, you're a better person. Does that mean somebody who is homeless, is a drug user, and has even committed violence, or done things, does that mean they're worth less? No, their worth as a human doesn't change. The actions that they do are not them. So your actions are things that you do, but they don't define your entire life and existence. Case in point, Lance Armstrong, you know, did a load of good stuff for cancer, cheated in a sport which is known for cheating. Do we say he's a good person or a bad person? We don't. He's got good and bad actions.
Yeah. I think I listened to a Sam Harris podcast maybe about a year ago about the cost of the human life, and the actions of governments wouldn't necessarily be in line with what you've said there, you know, in terms of saving, spending money to save lives. But I guess it's not a topic we would.
That's interesting. You know, I mean, that's a can of worms. That you know, I try to be apolitical at times, at all times, because I don't think it's possible to have a correct opinion that is 100% correct. So there has to be a flaw with every opinion that you hold, and your job is essentially to try and understand that. But I mean, yeah, how different governments operate is interesting from a psych perspective.
That's why I stick to help people get bigger biceps. A bit easier. So, just on the compassion bit there, you mentioned it's important to be compassionate to yourself, and that's not necessarily something that especially men will do. I think women are probably a little bit better because just the way that they've evolved and they care for well, they give birth and stuff like that. I think it's just part of their nature.
Correct.
Why is it that compassion one is important? How do you decipher between compassionate and just being, there, it's okay. You had another takeaway again for the 6th night in a row. Pat yourself in the back. Compassion,
right?
How do you decipher between the two?
The basic skill for trying to understand psychology or trying to understand any component of performance, put it on a spectrum, Goldilocks it, right? Too much, too little, just right. Right? It's all about optimization. Compassion. Can you be too compassionate? Maybe. Can you be not compassionate enough? Definitely. What's the right amount of it? Don't know. But your job when interacting with somebody is to actually work that out. And what I would say is that if you want to build a relationship with somebody, you go in compassionately. But whenever you challenge them, you have to challenge them compassionately as well. I understand that this is difficult for you, but you said you were going to do this and you haven't, and this is what you want to do. So how do you feel about that? That's a heavy challenge, because I'm not even saying you've done bad. I'm not judging you. I'm asking you to hold yourself to what you've said and explore that in a non-judgmental, compassionate way. But again, when we don't have compassion for somebody, what's the opposite of that? Is we don't care about them. Passion essentially means to suffer. Calm is with, passion is to suffer in Latin. So I'm here to suffer with you is essentially what you're doing when you're speaking compassionately. You're beside them. Sympathy is different. Sympathy is, oh, poor you. And that's kind of what you're saying is like, oh, poor me. I need to give myself another takeaway because I've had a hard week. It's like, it doesn't have to be sympathy. Sympathy is maybe, and it's a useful thing at times. Like, we should have sympathy for people, but again, it's better to have compassion and suffer with them. And again, suffering with them doesn't mean that you need to appease that suffering. You need to go, oh, you shouldn't be suffering, have some pizza. No, look, this is tough. You're feeling hunger, or you're feeling stress or frustration. How are we going to suffer through this? I think too often there's this positive idea that life needs to be positive and happy and all this nonsense. It's like, point a direction. If you want to achieve it, you're going to suffer in it. That's your direction of suffering, and go there. And along the way you'll experience successes, and actually you won't suffer because you'll experience successes which are the opposite of suffering. Sorry, I'm going down rabbit holes there. The other thing about empathy is like a subcomponent of compassion within MI, and the research clearly shows that the more empathetic somebody is, the better outcomes they're going to get whenever you work with them as a psych. And I'd say the same is probably true of S&C coaches and of nutritionists, and it is the same within doctors as well. Like, bedside manner is like, how do you show empathy? What do you say to them? And empathy is really, I see what you're going through. So for example, when you're talking about the difficulties of 8% body fat and getting down to that, you're feeling tired. I'm going to tell you what I see you're going through, and that's how you show empathy, which is a subcomponent of actually showing that you show compassion, or you are compassionate. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, if somebody's trying to be compassionate towards themselves, let's say they'll set a specific goal and they'll give themselves a timeline that if everything went perfect, which we know is not necessarily going to happen, that they will achieve that. And then if they don't, or a roadblock comes up, then usually they'll say, they'll come up with a lot of kind of explicitives to call themselves, and you're lazy, F and this, and that. Why is being compassionate to yourself important to keep moving forward? Okay. Is it that you'll stop, or is it that these negative emotions make the whole situation worse?
So if you're berating yourself and calling yourself names, which we all do, if you're self-critical of yourself, you're not showing compassion to yourself. I don't have an issue if you're critical of yourself. I have an issue of what does that criticism cause you to do. That's the difference. It's not about you saying I'm a piece of shit, right? It's about when you say that, what's the knock-on effect of that? Is that result in a behavior because you've said that to yourself? And is that behavior a behavior that moves you towards what you want to achieve or away from what you want to achieve? So that's the difference. And again, you can compassionately say, wasn't good enough, not happy, but that's okay, I make mistakes and I'm going to move forward. Failure's just feedback. So that's an adaptive way to be hard on yourself, whereas to go, I'm terrible, I'm woeful, I should give up. Well, again, that's not going to be a useful adaptive response to any difficulty or setback. I think the reality of life is that the bigger the difficulties you go through, the better you get at coping with them, and as you respond to a degree, like squatting, if you go through some difficulty, you get better at coping with that. I've recently become a parent and I know exactly what that means. It's like everything's difficult now. I feel like crap most days. Sleep is difficult, etc. But you get through it because you have to. It gives you. I mean, what I'm saying as well. The other thing is that there's growth after the difficulty. It's not a case of this is difficulty into the point where I die and I'm ground down. It's about the growth afterwards and giving yourself the space to recover from that. So I think the problem with me is when people set goals like David Goggins, etc., which are just grinding and don't result in recovery and maybe result in taking risks from a health perspective. Because here's the thing, if he had ran as hard as he ran, injured himself and then severely injured himself as a result of it, and he then had to get his foot amputated because of the damages done or whatever, something like that, nobody would be holding him up as some standard of mental strength. They'd just be going, I was a bit stupid, And I've seen this in rugby, like commentators saying he broke his arm and then went into the tackle. Okay, great. Could have broke his arm, went into the tackle after breaking the arm, and that bone could have then severed a nerve and ended his playing career. And that was an Irish international they were talking about. But nobody picked up on what's the risk of going into a tackle knowing you've already broke your arm. Everybody picks up on the hero status and the bravery, which is great because we value bravery as a society, but sometimes too much. Yeah,
I think the part where you mentioned going through something very difficult gives you this growth at the end. It really resonated with myself and with clients that I work with that do natural bodybuilding. It's like this. It's a very it's a strange thing from an outside perspective. Is why you would almost. My mother always says to me, like, "What, you're not doing that starving thing again," because you pretty much are starving yourself to the point where you're really impacting your hormones at an acute level in your health. But just to stand on stage, but when people have said and done it, and they being able to live life and to put up with the challenges in life in spite of that, or when you're going through that experience where you've really low energy, you're tired, you're not sleeping well, and still being able to deal with that really kind of opens their eyes to, oh wow, look what I can actually achieve from a mental capacity. Hugh, we're pretty much at time, but it's been amazing to chat to you, and we could probably talk for hours. I guess, where would people find more about this kind of these things? Because loads of people will set goals, whether it's regardless of what that is in life, and many people don't achieve them. And it's not, if it was as simple as just a maths formula or equation, you could just upload it once online and then everybody would have their desires and outcomes. But there's obviously a lot of challenges along the way, and maybe underlying foundations that people need to work on. So how do people if they want to learn more about what we spoke about today or any good resources, where would you point them in direction to?
I mean, that's a massive question, and I think I'd just answer it by like, stop setting goals and start setting learnings. I want to learn to be 8% body fat. Think about your performance as a learning approach, and that'll change your mindset as to how you view failure and how you view the challenges you face. I'm learning how to feel hunger and not reach for something that I shouldn't reach for. I'm learning how to squat and do so. Like, you learn strength as much as you develop the physiology around it. So I think that would be the first thing I'd say. I think that question is massive. I'm not too sure I can answer it. I know. Yeah, I mean, where would I don't know how to answer that question because it's so big. I mean, the reason being is like you're asking, how do we prepare everybody for everything? So
good point.
I think the big thing for me there would be like, go ask people advice, find experts, listen to all the episodes of your podcast, Adam, and I'm sure people will get more advice and information in that. Would be my approach. So listen to all the episodes if you haven't.
We didn't touch on it, but I'm sure you have some sort of process that you work through when someone says, I have this goal. You probably peel that back, right? Instead of just saying, well, I want to climb Mount Everest, and they've never left their couch, you'd probably start to peel that back. But I don't. You're probably going to talk for another 25 minutes. I know you got to jump.
I'll actually give you a quick answer on that one. On my Instagram, I've started doing a thing called Psyched in 60. One of them is goal setting, and I talk about my process of goal setting there in 60 seconds. So very simply, spend 5 minutes writing down everything you want to achieve in your life. Spend 5 minutes writing down everything you want to achieve in the next 3 or 5 years. Do the same 5 minutes for a year. Do the same for 6 months, and then go through everything you've written down. If you spent 5 minutes writing down everything in your life, and you probably find you get stuck after 2 minutes, you're like, shit, I've decided everything I want out of life. 8% body fat, yacht, Ferrari, financial freedom, what else? And then you're like, don't have anything else to put down. But do that, and do that process, and then go through and pick 2 things from each time sheet that you want to do. Pick another 2 things that are your B goals, 2 A goals, 2 B goals. All the rest, they're not important, they're C goals. And then set some plans to achieve that. How are you going to achieve those things, and you'll see how they connect up. Start acting on those plans, and then lastly, repeat that entire process every 3-4 months once you start seeing things getting checked off it. And that's a good way to peel back a goal. Biggest issue with setting goals, and then why that process works so good, is because people go, I want to achieve this goal, but they don't realize that they have many other goals, including being a parent, being a student, being a whatever. You have to set all your goals together, otherwise you aren't respecting the fact that your time is finite. So goal setting is a prioritization process, not a pick this and do that process. It's actually prioritizing it with other things in life. So yeah,
it's a great way to end. So where can people find more information about you and the work you're doing?
So I run a motivational interviewing course once a year, putting people through all 3 levels, and you can find that on my website, podiumpsychology.com. I have a number of free resources on critical thinking on YouTube, and I have an Instagram, and that would be the best way to get hold of me. Those are the best things that I put content out on, if people are interested.
I'll put all of those in the show notes, and I highly recommend people look at that. And I think you have a few articles as well that are out on your website. So thanks so much, Hugh, for coming on. Really, really appreciate it, and great conversation.
No worries. Thank you very much, Adam. It's been a pleasure. And I suppose what I would say is people need to get in and use your services, Adam, because I can see a great future for you, having had a wonderful conversation before this. So I think it'll be not too long before you're at capacity and won't be able to help as many people as you currently are.
Great, thanks for that. I'll give you the cash for saying that afterwards.
No worries.
Thanks.